In the earliest days of the Imperium, before the long shadow of betrayal had ever touched the stars, humanity moved forward with a confidence that felt almost eternal. Across 1,000,000 worlds, the banners of the Imperium rose against alien skies. Ancient planets long forgotten by history were rediscovered. Lost colonies, scattered during the dark centuries of Old Night, were brought once more into the fold of human civilization. It was an age spoken of in later centuries as a time of unity, of unstoppable momentum, when the dream of humanity's dominion over the galaxy seemed not only possible, but inevitable. At the center of this vast and expanding empire stood a single figure, the Emperor of mankind. He was not a ruler who spoke often to his people, nor was he a king who ruled through spectacle or public ceremony. Instead, he existed as a distant and guiding presence, a mind that shaped the destiny of humanity with a patience measured not in years, but in centuries. Few ever saw him. Fewer still understood him. Yet his will move fleets, commanded armies, and reshape the fate of entire star systems. From the throne world of terror, the Emperor directed the greatest campaign in human history, the Great Crusade. It was not a war of conquest alone, though countless battles were fought in its name. It was a mission of reunification. For thousands of years, humanity had been scattered among the stars. Storms within the strange dimension known as a warp had severed the ancient routes between distant worlds, isolating colonies and leaving them to survive as best they could. Some endured, some forgot their origins entirely, and some fell into darkness. When the storms finally receded, the Emperor began the long work of bringing humanity back together. Massive expeditionary fleets set forth from Terra. Each fleet carried thousands of soldiers, engineers, diplomats, and explorers. Their task was simple in principle, though monumental in scale: find the lost worlds of mankind, and return them to the Imperium. At the forefront of these fleets marched the Emperor's greatest creations, the Space Marines, genetically crafted warriors, taller and stronger than any natural human. The Space Marines were the instruments of the Emperor's will in the harshest corners of the galaxy. They were not merely soldiers. They were symbols. Wherever they arrived, the message was clear. Humanity had returned, and it had returned with the strength to endure. Among these warriors, none were greater than the Primarchs. The Primarchs were beings of extraordinary power and intellect, created by the Emperor himself in the earliest days of the Imperium. Each one possessed abilities far beyond those of ordinary men, and each had been entrusted with command of a Space Marine Legion. Together, they formed the pillars of the Great Crusade. Generals, leaders, and visionaries. Their victories became legend. Entire civilizations surrendered at their arrival. Alien empires were shattered by their campaigns. World after world was reclaimed for humanity. And among them all, one stood closer to the Emperor than the others: Horus. Horus was not merely a commander. He was the Emperor's most trusted son. In countless campaigns, Horus had proven himself not only a warrior of exceptional skill, but a leader capable of inspiring absolute loyalty from those who followed him. The soldiers of the Imperium spoke his name with admiration. The Space Marines of his legion followed him with unwavering devotion. And even among the Primarchs, Horus possessed a rare ability to unite warriors of vastly different temperaments and traditions. Where others ruled through discipline or fear, Horus ruled through presence. He understood the hearts of men. In the early years of the Crusade, this bond between the Emperor and Horus became a symbol of the Imperium's strength. Many believed the future of humanity rested upon their shared vision. The Emperor provided the grand design. Horus carried that design into the galaxy. Together, they represented the unity of purpose that defined the Imperium in those days. But the galaxy was vast, and even the Emperor's vision could not reach every corner of it at once. Beyond the borders of explored space lay countless mysteries, ancient ruins left behind by civilizations older than humanity, strange worlds where the laws of nature seemed subtly distorted, artifacts whose origins were lost to time. During the Great Crusade, the Imperium encountered wonders and dangers in equal measure. Some discoveries were celebrated, others were quietly sealed away. For while the Imperium presented itself as a beacon of rational order, the galaxy remained a place filled with forces that did not always obey simple understanding. The Emperor himself seemed keenly aware of this truth. Though he encouraged the advancement of science and the rejection of superstition, there were moments when even he exercised caution. There were regions of space the expeditionary fleets avoided, There were relics that were taken directly to Terra rather than studied openly, and there were secrets that only a handful of individuals were permitted to know. To most citizens of the Imperium, these precautions went unnoticed. Life within the expanding empire appeared stable and triumphant. Trade routes stretched across the stars. New worlds were colonized each year. Humanity, long divided and weakened by isolation, was becoming something far greater than it had ever been before. It was easy, in those days, to believe that the Imperium would endure forever. On distant frontier planets, settlers built cities beneath unfamiliar constellations. On forged worlds, great factories produced weapons and machines in numbers never before imagined. And across the void between stars, the fleets of the Great Crusade continued their relentless advance. Wherever they traveled, they carried the same promise: unity, order, and the return of humanity's lost destiny. Yet beneath this growing empire, subtle tensions already existed. The Primarchs were powerful beings, each shaped by unique experiences and personalities. Their methods often differed, sometimes dramatically. Some favored diplomacy when encountering lost human civilizations. Others preferred overwhelming military force. These differences rarely threatened the unity of the Crusade, but they revealed something important about the Imperium. It was not a perfectly balanced creation. It was a living empire, guided by powerful individuals whose decisions shaped the course of history. And history, as the Emperor surely understood, rarely moved in simple or predictable directions. Even in the earliest victories of the Crusade, small moments hinted at deeper mysteries. Occasionally, fleets would encounter planets whose records had been deliberately erased. Expeditions would vanish within unexplored star systems, or a newly rediscovered world would possess fragments of knowledge that seemed far older than humanity itself. These events were never discussed widely. Official records often described them only briefly before moving on to the next triumph of the Crusade. Yet those who served within the highest ranks of the Imperium sometimes sensed that the galaxy held truths that could not easily be explained, truths that the Emperor himself had already begun to confront. But such thoughts rarely lingered long in the minds of the Imperium citizens. The Great Crusade was a time of extraordinary optimism. Humanity had emerged from darkness. Its greatest leader guided it. Its armies were unmatched, and its future appeared limitless. Across the stars, the Imperium grew larger with every passing year. And as the fleets of the Crusade pushed ever farther into the unknown regions of the galaxy, the bond between the Emperor and his favored son Horus remained one of the brightest symbols of that era. Commander and A, vision and action. Together, they embodied the belief that humanity's destiny was finally within reach. For now, the stars welcomed the Imperium's advance. The banners of terror continued to rise above newly reclaimed worlds. And in the quiet chambers of command vessels drifting between distant suns, the architect of this vast empire looked outward toward a future that seemed filled only with possibility. A future where the scattered fragments of humanity would stand united beneath a single vision. A future shaped by the Emperor's design, and guided, in no small part, by the loyalty of the son who stood closest at his side. For in those early years of legend, before the storms that history would later remember, the Imperium still believed its path was clear. The galaxy seemed open. The stars seemed endless. And the long night of humanity's past felt, at last, as though it had truly come to an end. For now, the great fleets traveled onward through the silent void, their engines glowing softly against the darkness between worlds, carrying with them the hope of an empire that had only just begun to awaken. And somewhere beyond the reach of familiar stars, unseen forces quietly waited, their presence still hidden within the vast and patient depths of the galaxy. The story of that distant shadow, however, belongs to another moment in the long unfolding of the Imperium's history. In the early decades of the Great Crusade, when humanity's fleets moved across the stars with unstoppable momentum, one figure gradually came to represent the living spirit of the Imperium's expansion: Horus. Among the Primarchs, he was not the eldest in age nor the most outwardly imposing in appearance. Yet there was something within him that commanded attention wherever he walked. Officers found themselves speaking with unusual honesty in his presence. Warriors followed his commands without hesitation. Even those who had only briefly encountered him often carried a memory for the rest of their lives. Horus possessed a rare quality among the Emperor's sons. He understood people. The Primarchs had each been shaped by unique circumstances. Many of them were beings of immense intellect or overwhelming martial skill, but their brilliance often carried with it a certain distance from the ordinary men and women who served the Imperium. Horus was different. He could walk among soldiers and speak to them not as distant subjects, but as comrades sharing the same long journey through the stars. This ability made him invaluable during the Great Crusade. When expeditionary fleets arrived at newly discovered worlds, diplomacy was often as important as military strength. Lost human civilizations had developed in countless different ways during the long isolation of Old Night. Some greeted the Imperium with relief and gratitude. Others viewed the arrival of Terra's armies with suspicion or fear. In such moments, Horus frequently stood at the center of negotiations. He spoke with confidence, but never arrogance. He presented the Imperium not merely as a conquering power, but as a long-awaited return of a greater human destiny. Many worlds accepted the Emperor's authority after hearing Horus speak, and those that did not were soon reminded that the Imperium possessed the strength to enforce its unity. At the head of the 16th Legion, known as the Lunar Wolves, Horus led campaigns that became legendary even during the Crusade itself. The Lunar Wolves were warriors who reflected their Primaca's nature. They were aggressive in battle, swift in their assaults, and fiercely loyal to their commander. Where other legions favored rigid formations or careful long-term strategy, the Lunar Wolves often struck with overwhelming speed. Entire planetary defenses collapsed under their sudden offensives. Enemy strongholds fell within days. To the soldiers who fought beside them, the Lunar Wolves seemed unstoppable, and at their head stood Horus, guiding the legion with a mixture of bold decision-making and instinctive understanding of the battlefield. But Horus was not defined solely by his military victories. His relationship with the Emperor set him apart from his brothers. From the earliest years of the Crusade, the Emperor had spent considerable time in Horus's company. During long journeys between stars, father and son spoke privately about the Imperium's future. They discussed strategy, philosophy, and the countless challenges that came with ruling a galactic empire. These conversations were known only to a few witnesses, yet those who observed them often sensed that the Emperor saw something unique within Horus. Trust, not simply the trust given to a capable general, but the deeper trust reserved for someone who might one day carry the burden of leadership itself. The Emperor rarely expressed such thoughts openly. His vision for humanity stretched far beyond the lifetimes of ordinary men, and even the Primarchs understood only fragments of his greater plan. Still, within the fleets of the Crusade, rumors quietly circulated. Some believed Horus was destined to stand above his brothers. Others believed he had already become the Emperor's most valued son. Whether these whispers held truth or exaggeration mattered little. What mattered was the loyalty Horus inspired. Among the Primarchs, relationships were complex. They were powerful beings with immense pride and distinct personalities. Cooperation between their legions was essential for the success of the Crusade, yet disagreements occasionally emerged regarding strategy or authority. In many of these situations, Horus served as a mediator. His presence had a calming influence even among his formidable brothers. When disputes arose, Horus often found ways to guide conversation toward resolution without humiliation or resentment. This ability strengthened the unity of the Primarchs during the early years of the Imperium's expansion. Even so, the responsibilities placed upon Horus grew heavier with each passing campaign. The Imperium was expanding at a remarkable pace. New territories were added to its borders every year. Each newly reclaimed world required protection, administration, and integration into the wider structure of human civilization. Behind the victories of the Great Crusade stood an enormous network of fleets, supply lines, and governing institutions. Maintaining such a vast enterprise demanded constant attention. While the Emperor continued to guide the overall direction of the Crusade, he increasingly relied upon his sons to carry out the day-to-day leadership of its campaigns. And among them, Horus carried a greater share of that responsibility than most. Yet even in those early years of triumph, subtle questions began to surface within the highest ranks of the Imperium. The Emperor was a being of extraordinary knowledge and vision. His plans stretched far beyond the simple conquest of territory. He sought nothing less than the transformation of humanity into a unified and enlightened civilization capable of shaping its own destiny among the stars. But the galaxy was not a simple place. During the Crusade's explorations, the Imperium encountered remnants of civilizations that had once possessed immense power. Some had vanished long before humanity reached the stars. Others had left behind strange technologies and cryptic records hinting at events older than any human memory. Occasionally, these discoveries reached the attention of the Emperor himself. When they did, his response was often swift and decisive. Certain relics were removed from study and transported directly to Terra. Certain locations were placed under strict isolation, and certain pieces of knowledge were quietly restricted to only the most trusted individuals within the Imperium's hierarchy. Horus became aware of some of these decisions. Though he rarely questioned the Emperor's judgment, he could not ignore the pattern that seemed to emerge. The Imperium presented itself as a civilization founded upon reason and the rejection of superstition. Its armies fought to bring order and knowledge to a galaxy long consumed by ignorance. Yet occasionally, it seemed that even the Emperor preferred silence over explanation. These moments were rare, but they lingered in Horus's thoughts during the long journeys between campaigns. The stars beyond the fleet's viewing ports appeared calm and endless. Humanity's empire was growing stronger with every victory. And yet, hidden beneath that steady expansion, there were hints of deeper complexities, questions that had not yet been fully answered. For now, however, the Great Crusade continued with unwavering momentum. New systems were charted. New worlds were welcomed into the Imperium. And at the forefront of humanity's advance stood Horus, the Emperor's favored son, leading his legion through the silent depths of space toward the next horizon of conquest. To the countless soldiers who followed him, the future seemed clear. The Imperium would endure. The Emperor's vision would guide humanity forever, and the bond between father and son would remain the unbreakable foundation upon which that future was built. Yet far beyond the boundaries of explored space, the galaxy held secrets older than the Imperium itself. Secrets that had waited patiently through ages of forgotten history. Secrets that, one day, would begin to reveal themselves quietly and without warning. As the Great Crusade continued its steady expansion across the galaxy, the Imperium encountered wonders that few within humanity's ancient past could have imagined. Every newly charted system carried the possibility of rediscovering lost fragments of mankind's forgotten history. Ancient colony worlds, long isolated by the violent warp storms of old night, were often found thriving in unexpected ways. Some had preserved fragments of ancient Terran culture. Others had evolved into entirely unique civilizations shaped by centuries of isolation beneath alien suns. For the explorers and commanders of the Imperium, these discoveries were a reminder how vast and scattered humanity had once become. But not every discovery brought simple answers. Beyond the reclaimed worlds of mankind lay regions of space where silence itself seemed to linger. Systems with no active civilizations. Planets that bore the unmistakable signs of ancient habitation, yet showed no trace of those who had once lived there. Ruined cities sometimes stretch across entire continents. Towering structures of unknown design rose from desolate landscapes, their surfaces worn smooth by untold ages of wind and dust. In many such places, the Imperium's expeditionary fleets found themselves walking through the silent remains of civilizations that had vanished long before humanity's rise among the stars. For most Imperial commanders, these discoveries were treated simply as historical curiosities. Records were gathered, samples were taken, then the fleets moved onward to the next system awaiting compliance. The Great Crusade had little time for extended study. Its purpose was expansion, reunification, and the restoration of humanity's place within the galaxy. Yet there were occasions when a discovery attracted great attention. Certain ruins displayed technologies that could not easily be explained by conventional scientific understanding. Some artifacts exhibited strange energy patterns that Imperial scholars struggled to classify. And sometimes, entire worlds seemed subtly altered by forces that did not behave according to natural laws. In such cases, reports were often sent directly to Terra. The Emperor himself maintained a network of trusted agents and scholars who quietly monitored these unusual findings. Their task was not widely known within the Imperium's military hierarchy. Most commanders received only simple instructions: secure the site, preserve the artifact, await further direction. Horus encountered several such situations during his campaigns at the head of the Lunar Wolves. One particular world, located along the distant edges of a newly charted sector, left a lasting impression upon him. From orbit, the planet appeared barren. Its continents were vast stretches of stone and pale desert, broken only by jagged mountain ranges that cast long shadows across the surface. No active cities could be detected. No radio signals reached the orbiting fleet, yet the surveyors reported something unusual. Beneath the sand, enormous geometric structures had been detected, vast networks of chambers buried deep within the planet's crust. Horus ordered an exploratory descent. The landing craft carried a small detachment of lunar wolves accompanied by Imperial surveyors. Their task was simple: investigate the underground formations and determine whether they held any value for the Imperium. When the expedition reached the surface, they discovered the entrance to the structures hidden within a collapsed canyon. The opening descended into darkness, its walls carved with precision that suggested deliberate design rather than natural formation. Ancient corridors extended far beneath the planet's surface. Within them, the explorers found chambers whose scale rivaled the great halls of Terra itself. Massive pillars supported ceilings lost in shadow. Strange symbols marked certain walls, though their meaning could not be immediately deciphered. The structures were ancient, older, perhaps, than any human civilization known to Imperial historians. Despite the age of the complex, portions of its internal mechanisms still functioned. Soft pulses of energy moved through conduits embedded within the stone. Faint lights glowed within distant passageways. It was as though the structure itself had never truly fallen silent. For several hours, the expedition documented what they could. Then something unexpected occurred. Deep within the complex, one of the survey instruments began to react to an unusual energy fluctuation. The readings were unlike anything previously recorded by the Imperium scientific archives. The phenomenon lasted only a few seconds. But during that brief moment, the air within the chamber seemed to shift in a subtle and unsettling way. Several members of the team later described an indistinct sensation, as though the space around them had briefly grown aware. The feeling vanished almost immediately. The instruments returned to normal readings. Yet the incident left an undeniable impression on those present. When Horus reviewed the report aboard his flagship, he studied the data carefully. The descriptions were vague, but they were consistent among multiple witnesses. Something within that buried structure had reacted to their presence. The question was simple. What? The Primarch did not rush to conclusions. Instead, he forwarded the full report to Terra along with the expedition's collected data. Such matters, he believed, fell within the Emperor's greater understanding. The response arrived several days later. It was brief. The Emperor ordered the site secured and placed under Imperial authority. Further investigation will be conducted by specialists dispatched from Terra. Until their arrival, no additional exploration was to take place. Horus accepted the command without question, yet the event remained in his thoughts. During the long voyage to the Crusade's next destination, he spent time studying the ancient records that described humanity's earliest encounters with the galaxy. Many spoke of lost civilizations, forgotten technologies, and mysteries buried within the depths of unexplored space. The galaxy, it seemed, was far older than humanity's current age of expansion. Civilizations had risen and fallen countless times across its long history. Some had left behind only scattered ruins. Others had vanished so completely that no trace of their existence remained. In such a vast and ancient environment, it was perhaps inevitable that the Imperium would occasionally uncover remnants that defied simple explanation. Still, Horus trusted the Emperor's judgment. If certain discoveries required careful handling, then there was surely a reason. The Great Crusade was not merely a campaign of conquest. It was a process of rebuilding humanity's place within a complex and ancient galaxy. Some knowledge, perhaps, required patience before it could safely be understood. And so the fleets of the Imperium continued onward. New stars appeared before their prows. New worlds awaited rediscovery. And while the banners of Terra rose proudly above each newly compliant system, scattered remnants of older histories remained hidden among the distant corners of space. Quiet, waiting, their secrets preserved within forgotten ruins, buried worlds, and silent structures beneath alien skies. For now, those secrets remained undisturbed. But the Great Crusade had a way of uncovering even the most deeply buried truths. And with every new system explored, the Imperium moved one step closer to mysteries that had endured far longer than humanity itself. As the Great Crusade advanced deeper into the galaxy, the Imperium of Man grew at a pace rarely seen in the history of any civilization. What had once been a scattered collection of distant colonies was slowly transforming into a single unified empire stretching across the stars. Systems that had been separated for thousands of years were now connected again through fleets communication relays, and the steady presence of imperial authority. Yet the growth of such a vast empire brought with it a new and complex burden. Every world reclaimed during the Crusade required more than simple conquest. Once the banners of terror were raised above a planet's cities, the true work began. Administrators arrived to organize planetary governments. Engineers constructed the infrastructure necessary to support imperial fleets. Scholars gathered records of local history, knowledge, and technology. Entire departments of the Imperium were devoted to the task of integration. The newly rediscovered worlds of mankind often possessed their own traditions, laws, and beliefs. Some had developed stable civilizations that welcomed reunion with the wider human race. Others resisted the idea of surrendering their independence to a distant authority they had never known. For the commanders of the Crusade, these challenges required careful balance. Too much force risked destroying valuable cultures and resources. Too little authority could invite rebellion or instability within newly compliant systems. Many of the Primarchs approached this responsibility in different ways. Some ruled with strict discipline, believing that unity could only be achieved through absolute order. Others encouraged negotiation and gradual assimilation, allowing local traditions to continue beneath the broad structure of imperial governance. Horus often found himself navigating the delicate space between these approaches. During several campaigns along the outer edges of imperial expansion, his fleets encountered human civilizations that had endured centuries of hardship without outside assistance. Their people had fought to survive hostile environments, alien threats, and the long isolation of old night. Such worlds often possess strong identities and deeply rooted traditions. When confronted by the overwhelming power of the Imperium, many of their leaders feared losing the culture their ancestors had preserved through generations of struggle. Horus understood this fear. Rather than simply demanding obedience, he frequently spoke with planetary rulers directly. He explained the purpose of the Great Crusade and the Emperor's vision of a unified humanity that would never again face the isolation and collapse that had defined the Age of Strife. His words carried weight not only because of his authority, but because of the conviction with which he spoke them. In many cases, resistance dissolved after these conversations. Worlds that had once prepared for war instead chose to join the Imperium willingly. Their armies became part of the imperial war machine. Their industries contributed to the growing network of resources supporting the Crusade. This approach earned Horus a reputation among imperial officers. He was not merely a conqueror. He was a unifier, and in an empire built upon the reunion of lost worlds, such a talent was invaluable. Yet even as the Imperium grew stronger, the sheer scale of its expansion began to reveal subtle strains. The distances between systems were immense. Though warp travel allowed Imperial fleet to cross these vast spaces, journeys between distant regions could still take weeks or months. Communication delays were common. Messages sometimes arrived long after the events they described had already concluded. Maintaining cohesion across such an enormous domain required constant coordination. The Emperor remained the ultimate authority, yet his presence could not reach every frontier simultaneously. Much of the responsibility for maintaining order fell upon the Primarchs and their legions. Each commanded enormous forces. Each carried the authority of terror itself. And each made decisions that shaped the destiny of entire sectors. For the moment, this system functioned well. The Primarchs were loyal to their father and united in the purpose of the Crusade. Their victories reinforced a belief that the Imperium's expansion was both necessary and unstoppable. But beneath this success, thoughtful observers occasionally wondered how long such perfect alignment could endure. The Primarchs were powerful individuals, each possessing immense ambition and strong personal convictions. Their legions were fiercely loyal to them above all others. In times of unity, this structure created an unmatched force of expansion. Yet it also placed enormous influence in the hands of a relatively small number of leaders. Horus himself rarely reflected on such possibilities. His focus remained on the immediate responsibilities of the Crusade. Every campaign required careful planning, rapid decision-making, and constant attention to the well-being of the warriors who served beneath him. The Lunar Wolves, like all Space Marines, were created for war, but even they depended upon leadership that could guide them wisely through the endless conflicts of the galaxy. During quiet moments between campaigns, Horus sometimes walked alone through the observation decks of his flagship. From these high chambers, the stars stretched outward in silent brilliance. Each distant point of light represented another potential world, another civilization waiting to be discovered. another piece of humanity's scattered past waiting to be reclaimed. It was during such moments that the true scale of the Emperor's vision became clear. The Great Crusade was not merely a military campaign. It was a transformation of human destiny. A species that had once struggled to survive upon a single world was now spreading across the entire galaxy. The Imperium sought to ensure that humanity would never again face extinction through ignorance or division. Yet Horus also understood that such a monumental task required careful guidance. Empires throughout history had risen quickly only to collapse beneath their own weight. The Imperium could not afford such a fate. Its foundations needed to be strong enough to endure centuries, perhaps even millennia. For this reason, the Emperor had always emphasized unity above all else. Unity of purpose, unity of belief, unity of humanity. So long as those principles remained intact, the Imperium would continue to grow stronger. But unity required trust, and trust, like all fragile things, could only survive through constant care. As the Crusade fleets pushed farther into unexplored regions of the galaxy, the responsibilities placed upon the Imperium's leaders continued to grow. New challenges awaited beyond every unexplored star system. Alien civilizations that would not accept human rule, ancient technologies whose origins were unknown, and mysteries that even the Emperor himself seemed to approach with quiet caution. For now, however, the Imperium's expansion showed no sign of slowing. The fleets continued their journeys through the warp. The legions fought their battles beneath unfamiliar skies. And across the countless worlds newly reunited with Terra, humanity began to believe once again in the promise of a shared future among the stars. A future guided by the Emperor's distant wisdom, and carried forward by the loyalty of the sons who served at the forefront of his grand design. By the time the Imperium had reached the midpoint of the Great Crusade, the galaxy was no longer an empty expanse to be claimed without consequence. Its countless stars and worlds, long hidden by the tumult of warp storms and the drift of time, revealed histories older and more complex than the Emperor's most meticulous plans could anticipate. Humanity's resurgence was greeted with awe, but also with subtle reminders that the galaxy had endured epochs without mankind, and that not all forces within it bent easily to the will of even the most powerful empire. Horus, at the head of the Lunar Wolves, had long grown accustomed to this duality of progress and unpredictability. Victory in battle was certain, yet the intricacies of integrating newly reclaimed worlds demanded the same careful attention as the deployment of fleets. Every planet, every settlement, every ruling council represented a point where human civilization's past met the promise of its future. And in each of these encounters, Horus observed how the seemingly boundless confidence of the Imperium could be tempered by subtle realities, fragile human loyalties, hidden rivalries, and the whispers of civilizations older than mankind itself. It was on one such world, quietly tucked away on the edge of imperial charts, that the first truly unsettling moment of the Crusade occurred for the Lunar Wolves. The planet was small, its surface a tangled maze of forests and shallow seas. Scattered settlements of humans, descendants of colonies lost during the Age of Strife, greeted the Crusade with tentative relief. But Horus noticed immediately that beneath the superficial calm there was tension, subtle but undeniable. Children played in streets lined with crude stone houses. Yet the adults spoke in hushed tones about shadows that moved at night and about structures deep within the forest that no one dared approach. The Lunar Wolves were dispatched to investigate, not as conquerors, but as observers. As a detachment moved cautiously through the woods, they found ruins of a civilization far older than the colony above. Carvings lined the walls of collapsed temples, depicting figures that bore no resemblance to any human form. Symbols pulsed faintly with energy that the Lunar Wolves could not classify. The air itself seemed heavier within the ruins, carrying a stillness that suggested observation rather than absence. No life stirred, yet the place felt aware of the intruder's presence. Horus remained calm. He had seen many strange things during the Crusade. Yet this, something entirely alien and undeniably intelligent, elicited a rare moment of reflection. He ordered his men to document the ruins, to collect what information they could, and to leave the deeper chambers untouched. He understood, instinctively, that some knowledge was not meant for immediate possession. The Imperium had rules, laws, and procedures, but the galaxy often demanded caution beyond any regulation. The report was sent to Terra. As usual, the Emperor's response was measured. The site was to be monitored, yet untouched until expo could arrive from the throne world. Horus complied without question, yet he could not dismiss the sense that the galaxy still harbored secrets older than humanity's current dominion. The Imperium might be vast, its fleets unmatched, its legions unchallenged, but not everything could be shaped or controlled, even by the Emperor himself. For Horus, this became a pattern over the years of the Crusade. World could be reclaimed, cities rebuilt, and legions deployed, yet there were always places where humanity's authority felt provisional, as if the stars themselves were reminding the Primarch and his warriors that they were not the first to traverse these regions. The ruins, the hidden temples, the alien artifacts. There were subtle whispers from a galaxy that had endured millennia of civilizations rising and falling long before Terra ever gave birth to mankind's first empire. The report was sent to Terra. As usual, the Emperor's response was measured. The site was to be monitored, yet untouched until expert could arrive from the throne world. Horus complied without question, yet he could not dismiss the sense that the galaxy still harbored secrets older than humanity's current dominion. The Imperium might be vast, its fleets unmatched, its legions unchallenged, but not everything could be shaped or controlled, even by the Emperor himself. For Horus, this became a pattern over the years of the Crusade. Worlds could be reclaimed, cities rebuilt, and legions deployed, yet there were always places where humanity's authority felt provisional, as if the stars themselves were reminding the Primarch and his warriors that they were not the first to traverse these regions. The ruins, the hidden temples, the alien artifacts. There were subtle whispers from a galaxy that had endured millennia of civilizations rising and falling long before Terra ever gave birth to mankind's first empire. It was in such quiet spaces, far from the grand battlefields and the triumphant proclamations of the Crusade, that Horus often reflected on the true scale of the Imperium's undertaking. Expansion was more than a conquest. It was an attempt to reconcile humanity's scattered past with a vision of unity that spanned countless systems. And yet, each new discovery reminded him that the galaxy held layers of history that were beyond comprehension, layers that might one day challenge even the Emperor's design. These realizations did not diminish Horus' confidence. Rather, they strengthened his sense of responsibility. The power of the Lunar Wolves and the authority of the Primarchs were not simply instruments of war. They were guardians of humanity's fragile resurgence. Every legionary, every officer, every act of administration was a thread in a larger tapestry that sought to weave a coherent civilization from fragments scattered across the void. And yet the threads were delicate. One misstep, one misjudgment, could unravel centuries of careful progress. Beyond the immediate concerns of conquest and administration, Horus began to notice subtler phenomena. Some colonists spoke of visions, strange dreams that carried warning or insight. Some ancient machines activated briefly when touched by Imperial engineers, only to fall silent again. And occasionally, among the reports of fleet movements and planetary surveys, there were anomalies that did not fit any known classification, energies, distortions, and subtle fluctuations in the warp itself that suggested observation, or perhaps even judgment, by forces beyond understanding. Horus did not share these impressions with his men. Space Marines were trained for war, not speculation. They needed certainty, discipline, and direction. The Primarch's reflections were private, a quiet meditation on the nature of power and responsibility. Yet the feeling lingered, that even in victory, humanity's position in the galaxy was provisional, that even as the banners of terror rose above every reclaimed world, there existed shadows that remained unseen, patient, and enduring. It was during one of these long periods of reflection, as Horus gazed upon the stars from the observation deck of his flagship, that the vastness of the Imperium truly became apparent. Each point of light was a potential world, a potential civilization, a potential challenge. And the farther the Crusade reached, the more Horus recognized the delicate balance that sustained the Empire, unity maintained not by chance, but by vigilance, foresight, and the disciplined loyalty of thousands of men shaped into legions. The Imperium's strength was immense, yet it was tethered to fragile threads of understanding, strategy, and the measured application of authority. For now, the shadows that lingered beyond the edge of imperial knowledge remained distant. The Great Crusade moved forward, and the Emperor's vision guided the fleets with unwavering purpose. Yet Horus understood, as no one else fully could, that even the brightest light cast shadows, and that the silent mysteries of the galaxy were patient in their observation. They waited in ruins, in hidden chambers, and beneath alien suns, their presence unnoticed yet undeniable, marking the Imperium's path with subtle reminders of forces older than any empire, older than any sun, and older than the Emperor himself. In the calm that followed each campaign, as fleets sailed between stars and planets awaited integration, Horus allowed himself one final thought, that the galaxy was vast, humanity was resilient, and yet beneath all certainty there existed an undercurrent of truth too ancient and deliberate to ignore. For now, the Imperium pressed on, its destiny guided by vision, loyalty, and the careful hands of those chosen to carry it forward. And somewhere in the silent reaches of space, the shadows waited, patient, enduring, and unseen. By the time the Imperium had extended its reach across countless systems, the Great Crusade had become more than a campaign of reconquest. It had become a delicate orchestration of power, diplomacy, and vision, one that required the constant attention of the Emperor and the Primarchs alike. Every newly rediscovered world was both a victory and a responsibility, a node in a vast network whose coherence depended upon the discipline of men who had been sculpted for war yet entrusted with governance, and upon the loyalty of those few who could carry the Emperor's vision across unimaginable distances of space. Horus, at the helm of the Lunar Wolves, had long understood the importance of this fragile balance. The legions were vast instruments of strength, each consisting of tens of thousands of warriors whose skill, loyalty, and discipline surpassed anything humanity had ever produced. Yet these legions were more than mere armies. They were extensions of their primarchs, embodiments of personal command and philosophy. The personality, temper, and temperament of each primarch shaped not only the strategy of a campaign, but the very character of the men under their command. Horus's own legion reflected a mixture of precision, instinct, and flexibility, a mirror of its master's approach to both war and governance. In this period, the Emperor increasingly relied upon the Primarchs not only to lead armies but to maintain the integrity of the Empire as it expanded. Each legion served as both enforcer and custodian, capable of subduing rebellion, integrating lost colonies, and guiding populations toward obedience and prosperity. This was no simple task. Many worlds had grown accustomed to centuries of isolation, their inhabitants shaped by necessity and hardship rather than allegiance to terror. Bringing them into the Imperium required more than coercion. It required understanding, persuasion, and at times subtle negotiation, a skill set that Horus had mastered beyond any of his brothers. The trust that the Emperor placed in him was unparalleled. Horus did not question the wisdom of his father, nor did he doubt the vision that had guided humanity from the dark centuries of the Age of Strife to the dawn of the Great Crusade. Yet the responsibility weighed heavily. In every campaign, every decision, every interaction with a newly reunited world, Horus recognized that a misjudgment could ripple across the Imperium with consequences far greater than any battle lost. Victory was necessary, but the sustainability of that victory depended upon careful attention to loyalty, morale, and the integration of human societies into a coherent imperial structure. Even among the Primarchs, the dynamics of trust were subtle and complex. Though united in purpose, they were not identical in temperament. Some were rigid, unyielding in their methods, favoring strict application of authority over diplomacy. Others possessed brilliance tempered with unpredictability, often inspiring loyalty through charisma rather than fear. Horus stood at the center of these variations, not as an arbiter, but as a model of leadership that combined strategic acuity, empathy, and adaptability. He understood that each Primarch's methods were effective in their own domain, yet that the Imperium's long-term cohesion depended upon cooperation, shared vision, and the careful management of potential rivalries. This delicate equilibrium was tested continuously. As the Crusade advanced, reports of unusual discoveries and anomalous phenomena arrived from the edges of explored space. Certain worlds harbored ruins of civilizations older than humanity, containing technologies and knowledge that defied immediate understanding. Artifacts, when studied, sometimes exhibited properties that appeared to respond to the presence of Imperial forces. These incidents were rare, yet they served as constant reminders that the galaxy was not merely a blank canvas for humanity's expansion. The Crusade was both an exercise in reclamation and a cautious interaction with forces that had endured for millennia. Horus's response was always measured. While he enforced the Emperor's authority where necessary, he also recognized the limits of immediate comprehension. Some phenomena could not be approached recklessly. Some knowledge required patience. The Imperium's longevity depended not only upon the victories of fleets and legions, but upon the restraint exercised in moments when the unknown presented itself. The trust the Emperor placed in his sons extended to judgment in these matters, to know when to act, when to observe, and when to defer to wisdom that spanned centuries of planning and insight. Within the lunar wolves, this principle manifested as discipline combined with discretion. The warriors under Horus's command were unmatched in combat skill, yet they were trained to follow orders without question while respecting the strategic foresight of their primarch. Such alignment of loyalty and understanding was not universal across all legions. Some primarch demanded obedience rooted in fear or awe, others relied upon the personal bonds formed through shared hardship. Horus, by contrast, cultivated loyalty through trust, through shared purpose, and through the knowledge that every victory contributed not only to immediate objectives but to the long-term survival and unity of humanity. The Emperor, aware of these dynamics, maintained careful oversight. He intervened when necessary, but much of the day-to-day administration of the Crusade relied upon the discretion of his sons. The vastness of space made it impossible for him to personally oversee every planetary integration, every fleet movement, every emerging challenge. Horus's judgment, therefore, was not simply a matter of tactical command. It was an extension of the Emperor's will, exercised with both authority and responsibility, and tempered by understanding of human nature and the complexities of empire. Yet Horus also understood that loyalty, no matter how steadfast, required reinforcement. The soldiers of the Imperium were not automatons. They were men shaped by training, experience, and the example of those who led them. The primarchs themselves served as living symbols of the ideals the Emperor sought to instill: courage, discipline, wisdom, and the unwavering pursuit of humanity's enduring unity. Any deviation from these principles, even minor, had the potential to ripple through entire legions, undermining the cohesion that made the crusade effective. Horus's vigilance, therefore, extended beyond the battlefield. It encompassed governance, morale, and the maintenance of trust at every level of command. In quieter moments, as a fleet sailed through the silent vastness between stars, Horus reflected upon the weight of these responsibilities. The stars themselves seemed to stretch endlessly, a constant reminder of the immensity of the Imperium's mission and the fragility of its foundation. Each world integrated, each legion disciplined, each fleet deployed, was a testament not only to the Emperor's vision but also to the care with which that vision was carried into the galaxy. Mistakes, Horus knew, could not always be undone. The galaxy's memory was long, and the consequences of misjudgment could echo for generations. Still, the Great Crusade advanced with remarkable consistency. Every victory reinforced the Imperium's strength. Every recovered world added to its coherence, and everywhere the lunar wolves went, the presence of Horus served as a stabilizing force, guiding not only the men of his legion but also the broader efforts of humanity toward unity and resilience. His example, his decisions, and his quiet reflection upon the trust placed in him ensured that the expansion of the Imperium was not merely a conquest of space but a careful stewardship of human civilization. And so, beneath the serene brilliance of distant stars, the lunar wolves continued their campaigns. Horus, at their helm, carried a burden of command with calm authority, aware that each action, each choice, each measured decision reinforced a fragile lattice upon which the Imperium's unity depended. Across the galaxy, human civilization was being stitched together once more, world by world, guided by vision, discipline, and the careful management of trust. Trust that would soon be tested in ways not yet imagined, in shadows that even the brightest light of the Emperor had not yet reached. The Great Crusade, in its relentless advance across the stars, had transformed the Imperium into a vast network of human worlds, each linked to terror through fleets, administrators, and the silent authority of the Emperor's legions. For many, this era seemed timeless, as though the very act of humanity's reunion had brought permanence to the galaxy. Yet even in the midst of this apparent certainty, there existed an undercurrent of subtle tension, one that whispered not of rebellion, but of the fragility inherent in empires that stretched across light years of space. Horus, as ever, remained at the center of the unfolding human destiny. His legion, the lunar wolves, moved with precision and purpose, subduing hostile worlds and integrating compliant civilizations with equal care. The Primarch's presence inspired confidence, yet his awareness of the wider implications of conquest had grown with every campaign. Each new system reclaimed was not merely an addition to the Imperium. It was a responsibility, a chain in a larger structure whose stability depended upon constant vigilance. The quiet periods between battles offered moments for reflection. Observation decks aboard Horus's flagship provided a panoramic view of distant stars, each a potential world, each a silent reminder of both progress and limitation. In these moments, he contemplated the duality of the Crusade, the certainty of the Emperor's authority juxtaposed against the vast, unpredictable galaxy that still lay beyond Terra's immediate influence. Even as humanity thrived, the universe retained its mysteries, ancient ruins, dormant technologies, and artifacts whose origins were long forgotten. The knowledge that such forces existed, even if currently dormant, imposed a responsibility on Horus and his legion to proceed with prudence. Even among the Primarchs, the dynamics of trust were subtle and complex. Though united in purpose, they were not identical in temperament. Some were rigid, unyielding in their methods, favoring strict application of authority over diplomacy. Others possessed brilliance tempered with unpredictability, often inspiring loyalty through charisma rather than fear. Horus stood at the center of these variations, not as an arbiter, but as a model of leadership that combined strategic acuity, empathy, and adaptability. He understood that each Primarch's methods were effective in their own domain, yet that the Imperium's long-term cohesion depended upon cooperation, shared vision, and the careful management of potential rivalries. This delicate equilibrium was tested continuously. As the Crusade advanced, reports of unusual discoveries and anomalous phenomena arrived from the edges of explored space. Certain worlds harbored ruins of civilizations older than humanity, containing technologies and knowledge that defied immediate understanding. Artifacts, when studied, sometimes exhibited properties that appeared to respond to the presence of Imperial forces. These incidents were rare, yet they served as constant reminders that the galaxy was not merely a blank canvas for humanity's expansion. The Crusade was both an exercise in reclamation and a cautious interaction with forces that had endured for millennia. Horus's response was always measured. While he enforced the Emperor's authority where necessary, he also recognized the limits of immediate comprehension. Some phenomena could not be approached recklessly. Some knowledge required patience. The Imperium's longevity depended not only upon the victories of fleets and legions, but upon the restraint exercised in moments when the unknown presented itself. The trust the Emperor placed in his sons extended to judgment in these matters, to know when to act, when to observe, and when to defer to wisdom that spanned centuries of planning and insight. Within the lunar walls, this principle manifested as discipline combined with discretion. The warriors under Horus's command were unmatched in combat skill, yet they were trained to follow orders without question while respecting the strategic foresight of their primarch. Such alignment of loyalty and understanding was not universal across all legions. Some Primarch demanded obedience rooted in fear or awe, others relied upon the personal bonds formed through shared hardship. Horus, by contrast, cultivated loyalty through trust, through shared purpose, and through the knowledge that every victory contributed not only to immediate objectives, but to the long-term survival and unity of humanity. The Emperor, aware of these dynamics, maintained careful oversight. He intervened when necessary, but much of the day-to-day administration of the Crusade relied upon the discretion of his sons. The vastness of space made it impossible for him to personally oversee every planetary integration, every fleet movement, every emerging challenge. Horus's judgment, therefore, was not simply a matter of tactical command. It was an extension of the Emperor's will, exercised with both authority and responsibility, and tempered by understanding of human nature and the complexities of empire. Yet Horus also understood that loyalty, no matter how steadfast, required reinforcement. The soldiers of the Imperium were not automatons. They were men shaped by training, experience, and the example of those who led them. The Primarchs themselves served as living symbols of the ideals the Emperor sought to instill: courage, discipline, wisdom, and the unwavering pursuit of humanity's enduring unity. Any deviation from these principles, even minor, had the potential to ripple through entire legions, undermining the cohesion that made the Crusade effective. Horus's vigilance, therefore, extended beyond the battlefield. It encompassed governance, morale, and the maintenance of trust at every level of command. In quieter moments, as a fleet sailed through the silent vastness between stars, Horus reflected upon the weight of these responsibilities. The stars themselves seemed to stretch endlessly, a constant reminder of the immensity of the Imperium's mission and the fragility of its foundation. Each world integrated, each legion disciplined, each fleet deployed, was a testament not only to the Emperor's vision but also to the care with which that vision was carried into the galaxy. Mistakes, Horus knew, could not always be undone. The galaxy's memory was long, and the consequences of misjudgment could echo for generations. Still, the Great Crusade advanced with remarkable consistency. Every victory reinforced the Imperium's strength. Every recovered world added to its coherence. And everywhere the lunar wolves went, the presence of Horus served as a stabilizing force, guiding not only the men of his legion but also the broader efforts of humanity toward unity and resilience. His example, his decisions, and his quiet reflection upon the trust placed in him ensured that the expansion of the Imperium was not merely a conquest of space but a careful stewardship of human civilization. And so, beneath the serene brilliance of distant stars, the lunar wolves continued their campaigns. Horus, at their helm, carried the burden of command with calm authority, aware that each action, each choice, each measured decision reinforced a fragile lattice upon which the Imperium's unity depended. Across the galaxy, human civilization was being stitched together once more, world by world, guided by vision, discipline, and the careful management of trust that would soon be tested in ways not yet imagined, in shadows that even the brightest light of the Emperor had not yet reached. The Great Crusade, in its relentless advance across the stars, had transformed the Imperium into a vast network of human worlds, each linked to Terra through fleets, administrators, and the silent authority of the Emperor's legions. For many, this era seemed timeless, as though the very act of humanity's reunion had brought permanence to the galaxy. Yet even in the midst of this apparent certainty, there existed an undercurrent of subtle tension, one that whispered not of rebellion, but of the fragility inherent in empires that stretched across light years of space. Horus, as ever, remained at the center of the unfolding human destiny. His legion, the Lunar Wolves, moved with precision and purpose, subduing hostile worlds and integrating compliant civilizations with equal care. The Primarch's presence inspired confidence, yet his awareness of the wider implications of conquest had grown with every campaign. Each new system reclaimed was not merely an addition to the Imperium. It was a responsibility, a chain in a larger structure whose stability depended upon constant vigilance. The quiet periods between battles offered moments for reflection. Observation decks aboard Horus's flagship provided a panoramic view of distant stars, each a potential world, each a silent reminder of both progress and limitation. In these moments, he contemplated the duality of the Crusade, the certainty of the Emperor's authority juxtaposed against the vast, unpredictable galaxy that still lay beyond Terra's immediate influence. Even as humanity thrived, the universe retained its mysteries, ancient ruins, dormant technologies, and artifacts whose origins were long forgotten. The knowledge that such forces existed, even if currently dormant, imposed a responsibility on Horus and his legion to proceed with prudence. Instruments occasionally detected fluxes that vanished before explanations could be formulated. Horus observed the reports carefully, discerning patterns in the anomalies that others might have dismissed. The ruins, he realized, were not abandoned by chance. They bore the marks of deliberate design, of intention maintained across centuries. Some chambers appeared to respond to the presence of the Imperium's forces, as though awaiting recognition or interaction. The phenomenon was fleeting and subtle, yet unmistakable. The galaxy, even in its apparent silence, was aware of the Imperium's advance. The Emperor, when informed, instructed caution. The site was to be monitored, artifact collected for study, and no further incursion made until experts arrived from Terra. Horus complied, understanding that some knowledge required patience and careful handling. In the privacy of his thoughts, he considered the implications. The galaxy contained histories older than humanity, powers beyond comprehension, and mechanisms that might challenge even the most disciplined assumptions. Expansion, no matter how methodical, could awaken consequences that lay hidden beneath the apparent calm of newly reclaimed worlds. The Lunar Wolves continued their campaigns, yet Horus maintained a vigilance that extended beyond conventional battlefield awareness. The Primarch's attention to subtle anomalies became a habit, as natural and essential as maintaining the Legion's operational readiness. Reports of unusual energy fluctuations, dormant machinery, and cryptic ruins arrived intermittently from newly explored sectors. Each warranted documentation, but Horus also encouraged his captains to observe quietly, to resist the temptation of hasty interference. Knowledge, he understood, could be as dangerous as ignorance of approach without care. Beyond individual worlds, the broader pattern became clear. Certain regions of space consistently revealed artifacts or phenomena that challenged understanding. Ships passing through warp currents occasionally reported disturbances, brief sensations of unease, or instruments recording data inconsistent with expected readings. On more than one occasion, surveyors described a faint impression of movement within deep space, not physical, yet undeniably perceptible. These occurrences were subtle, often ignored by others, yet Horus took note. To him, they were reminders that the galaxy was neither passive nor inert. It had endured civilizations long before humanity and would endure long after any single campaign. The Imperium, for all its strength, was a newcomer in a galaxy of patient observers. Horus shared some of his reflections with trusted officers within the Lunar Wolves. He did not command them to fear, but to respect. Discipline and loyalty remained paramount, yet understanding the unknown could ensure both survival and long-term success. Warriors trained to execute orders without hesitation could be guided to act with prudence if they recognized a way to the universe's hidden complexities. Horus's guidance emphasized balance, aggression tempered with caution, curiosity guided by restraint, and action informed by careful observation. In quieter moments, he allowed himself contemplation. As his flagship drifted through the warp between distant systems, the Primarch often gazed at the stars, noting their endlessness and the hidden histories they implied. Each light represented a world, many of which had their own ancient stories, their own remnants of civilizations that had risen and fallen without human awareness. Humanity's expansion was swift, yet the galaxy's memory endured. Ruins, artifacts, and energies persisted like faint echoes, waiting, perhaps, for the Imperium to encounter them. Horus sensed that these forces were patient, calculating, and perhaps indifferent to immediate outcomes. The trust between Horus and the Emperor remained unwavering. Yet with each campaign, the Primarch's understanding of the galaxy deepened. The Great Crusade was not merely a sequence of victories. It was a delicate exercise in stewardship. Every legion under his command, every fleet deployed, every newly integrated world contributed to a structure of human civilization that could endure or falter depending on the application of judgment and care. Strength alone was insufficient. Foresight and understanding of subtle currents within the galaxy were essential to maintaining cohesion. Even as the crusade pressed forward, Horus sensed a quiet tension at the edges of comprehension. The galaxy's shadows were patient, and the Imperium's expansion inevitably brushed against them. Yet the vigilance exercised by the Primarch and his legion ensured that no immediate danger emerged. Progress continued. Worlds were integrated. The emperors were unfolded across the stars. Yet the awareness remained. There existed forces unseen, histories untold, and patterns older than humanity itself. And so, beneath the steady light of distant suns and the silent expanse of warp currents, the Lunar Wolves carried out their campaigns. Horus guided his legion with calm authority, aware that every success was accompanied by responsibility, and that the galaxy's hidden depths required patience, observation, and restraint. The Great Crusade advanced, human unity grew stronger, and the banners of terror rose on countless worlds. Yet in the stillness beyond, the galaxy waited, enduring, indifferent, and watchful, carrying secrets older than the Imperium and mysteries that would one day challenge even the brightest sons of the Emperor. As the Great Crusade pressed ever outward, the Emperor's influence extended across a galaxy that had long seemed unconquerable. His will shaped fleets, guided legions, and illuminated the path of humanity's reunification, yet his presence was a distant beacon rather than an omnipresent force. Across the stars, the Primarchs carried his intent into the hearts of newly discovered worlds, executing strategies that reflected both the precision of their training and the subtle wisdom imparted by the Emperor himself. In this way, the Crusade became both a campaign of conquest and a demonstration of careful stewardship, a union of might and judgment that allowed humanity to flourish once more in a universe that had long seemed indifferent to its survival. Horus, the Emperor's favored son, moved at the center of this orchestration. As Primarch of the Lunar Wolves, he oversaw campaigns that combined discipline, speed, and adaptability, ensuring that victories were decisive yet tempered with the foresight required for long-term stability. The soldiers under his command were unmatched in skill, yet Horus recognized that their effectiveness depended not merely on strength, but on the clarity of leadership and the trust instilled by their Primarch. Loyalty, for Horus, was a living principle, cultivated through example, reinforced by shared purpose, and maintained through the careful attention to both triumph and failure. Across the frontier, the Imperium's fleets continued to encounter remnants of civilizations long forgotten. Some worlds bore ruins older than the earliest Terran records, carved with geometries and symbols that defied immediate comprehension. The Emperor, observing the Crusade from Terra, relied upon his sons to execute this vision with precision. The Great Crusade had grown beyond the capacity of a single mind, no matter how vast its intellect or foresight. The Primarchs were entrusted with both authority and judgment, each carrying responsibility for tens of thousands of warriors, countless planetary populations, and the delicate integration of cultures long isolated from human civilization. Horus's loyalty, wisdom, and ability to balance force with understanding made him particularly suited to this role. Yet even he recognized the fragility inherent in such a vast structure. The Imperium's strength was immense, yet it rested upon human choices, discipline, and the careful alignment of countless elements across space and time. During long periods of travel between campaigns, Horus often reflected upon the Emperor's distant gaze. From orbit aboard his flagship, he would watch stars stretch across the void, each point of light a potential world or civilization waiting to be discovered. The Emperor's presence was never intrusive. It was a steady guiding force that allowed the Primarchs to act decisively yet wisely. Horus understood that the success of the Crusade depended upon this balance. Authority exercised without micromanagement, strength tempered with foresight, and a careful attention to both the seen and unseen consequences of every decision. The Lunar Wolves themselves mirror the philosophy of their Primarch. Their campaigns combined speed, aggression, and adaptability, yet these qualities were always balanced by careful planning and observation. On worlds where initial resistance existed, diplomacy often preceded combat, and where force was necessary, it was applied decisively and with minimal disruption to civilian populations. Horus recognized that the long-term stability of the Imperium depended not only upon immediate victories but upon the successful integration of new civilizations, the preservation of infrastructure, and the cultivation of trust among populations that had endured isolation for centuries. It was during one such campaign that the subtle fragility of the Imperium became apparent. A remote human colony, long isolated and struggling to maintain survival under harsh environmental conditions, initially welcomed the arrival of Imperial forces. Yet beneath the apparent calm, tension simmered. Old rivalries between local factions resurfaced, and whispers of discontent reached Horus's attention. The Lunar Wolves moved carefully, establishing oversight without unnecessary interference. Horus spoke personally with leaders, fostering understanding and reinforcing the principles of unity and loyalty that underpinned the Crusade. By balancing firmness with measured patience, he ensured the colony's full integration into the Imperium without creating resentment or division. In these quieter moments between battles and fleet movements, Horus considered the galaxy's broader scale. Even as humanity's influence expanded, the universe retained layers of history, intelligence, and power that had existed long before the rise of Terra. Ruins, artifacts, and energies that defied comprehension were constant reminders that the Imperium, for all its might, was still a newcomer in a galaxy shaped by forces far older than mankind. These reflections did not weaken Horus. Rather, they strengthened his vigilance, informing both strategy and leadership. The Great Crusade was not merely an outward projection of power, but also an exercise in stewardship, requiring patience, understanding, and the careful balancing of knowledge and authority. The Emperor's distant gaze remained a guiding presence throughout these considerations. His influence shaped the actions of Primarchs, informed the decisions of legions, and ensured the cohesion of an empire spanning countless light years. Yet the Imperium's expansion, Horus knew, was not guaranteed. Strength, discipline, and vision were essential, but they existed within a galaxy capable of unexpected responses. Every decision, every integration, and every encounter carried both opportunity and risk. The Primarch's vigilance, judgment, and measured application of authority were as critical to the Crusade's success as the sheer force of the legions themselves. As the fleets moved from system to system, the Lunar Wolves continued their campaigns with calm efficiency. Worlds were reclaimed, populations guided into unity, and infrastructure reinforced to support the wider Imperium. Horus's presence ensured cohesion, morale, and adaptability, guiding both soldiers and civilians alike. Yet beneath the apparent certainty of progress, the galaxy waited with patience. Ancient structures remained undiscovered, energies lay dormant, and secrets older than the Imperium persisted, hidden in the silence of deep space. In the quiet moments, Horus allowed himself a single reflection, that the Emperor's vision was vast, the Imperium was resilient, and yet, even at its height, humanity's dominion was provisional. The galaxy was enduring, observant, and patient, carrying mysteries and powers that might one day test the very foundations of Terra's empire. For now, the Great Crusade continued with unwavering momentum, guided by the distant light of the Emperor and the careful stewardship of his sons. Yet somewhere, far beyond the reach of immediate comprehension, the universe waited, patient, enduring, and ever watchful, preparing for a time when even the brightest of humanity's triumphs might encounter shadows older than any living soul could imagine. The Great Crusade had by now reached a scale that was almost incomprehensible. Entire sectors of the galaxy had been brought into the fold of the Imperium, their populations integrated under the authority of Terra, their fleets aligned with the will of the Emperor, and their defenses reinforced by the presence of the legions. Yet even as victory seemed assured, there existed an awareness among the Primarchs that the vastness of the Imperium brought challenges that extended far beyond warfare. Expansion, discipline, and loyalty were necessary, but they were never sufficient alone. Each new system reclaimed revealed the complexity of human civilization, the unpredictability of local customs, and the lingering presence of forces older than humanity itself. Horus, Primarch of the Lunar Wolves, carried the weight of his knowledge with a measured calm. His campaigns were decisive, yet never rushed. His strategies combined both aggression and caution, ensuring that victories were not hollow and that integration was sustainable. The legions under his command were instruments of both war and governance, capable of enforcing order with precision while also guiding populations toward unity and compliance. Horus recognized that leadership demanded both action and reflection, a combination that few could maintain over decades of continuous campaigns. Horus recognized that leadership demanded both action and reflection, a combination that few could maintain over decades of continuous campaigns. The Emperor, observing from Terra, trusted his sons to execute this vision, yet the vast distances of the galaxy ensured that much of the crusade depended upon the judgment of the Primarchs. Each legion was an extension of its master's will, yet also a reflection of the individuality of the Primarch. Horus understood this duality. His authority was absolute within his legion, yet he exercised it with an understanding that loyalty was cultivated through example, trust, and measured restraint. Command was not simply about enforcing orders. It was about guiding men to act decisively while maintaining cohesion across the Imperium. The galaxy itself, however, reminded the Crusade constantly of its vast and enduring complexity. Ancient ruins, dormant technologies, and unexplained phenomena persisted in remote sectors, often presenting subtle challenges that could not be ignored. On certain worlds, survey teams encountered structures older than humanity's oldest records, embedded with energies and mechanisms that seemed responsive to observation or approach. Horus recognized that these were not mere curiosities. They were markers of a universe older than the Imperium, containing forces that might, in time, influence or challenge its expansion. Patience and careful study were required, as much as martial skill. During one campaign in a distant system, the Lunar Wolves encountered a colony world whose population had lived isolated for centuries. At first, the integration seemed straightforward. The colonists, relieved at the arrival of Imperial forces, welcomed guidance and protection. Yet beneath the surface lay subtle divisions, tensions rooted in long-standing rivalries, and cultural habits shaped by survival and isolation. Horus moved cautiously, meeting leaders personally, listening to concerns, and applying the authority of the Emperor not as domination but as guidance. Military force was only applied when absolutely necessary. Diplomacy and understanding ensured that the colony joined the Imperium willingly and without resentment. This approach was emblematic of Horus's broader philosophy. Victory in battle was essential, but the endurance of the Imperium depended upon stability, loyalty, and foresight. Legions were not merely instruments of war. They were stewards of human civilization, responsible for guiding and maintaining unity across countless star systems. The careful balance between enforcement and guidance became a hallmark of Horus's campaigns. His presence ensured that his legion acted with precision, purpose, and understanding, reinforcing the Emperor's vision while adapting to the unique challenges of each reclaimed world. Even in quieter moments, as fleets traveled through the warp between systems, Horus reflected upon the magnitude of their mission. Each star, each planet, represented not only an opportunity but a responsibility. The Imperium's expansion was more than conquest. It was a restoration of a scattered humanity to a coherent empire capable of surviving in a galaxy that had endured cycles of civilization and collapse. Ancient forces, subtle anomalies, and dormant energies reminded him that the galaxy had long memories, and that the Imperium's success depended not merely on strength but on the vigilance, judgment, and restraint of those entrusted to carry its authority. Horus's thoughts often returned to the Emperor's distant gaze. The Primarch could not fully perceive the entirety of the vision, yet he understood its scale. The unification of humanity across a galaxy of unparalleled complexity, the establishment of an enduring civilization, and the careful management of forces both seen and unseen. Every legionary, every fleet, and every newly integrated colony represented a step toward this goal. Each campaign was a test of discipline, judgment, and loyalty. The Imperium's success depended upon the careful execution of responsibilities, the recognition of subtle patterns, and the understanding that strength alone could not ensure the stability of an empire spanning thousands of worlds. In the years that followed, the lunar wolves encountered phenomena that further reinforced the need for measured caution. Ancient ruins, cryptic machinery, and unexplained energies appeared at irregular intervals across the frontier. While these occurrences rarely threatened immediate objectives, they served as reminders that the galaxy was vast, patient, and often indifferent to humanity's ambitions. Horus regarded each discovery with careful attention, ensuring that actions taken by his legion would not inadvertently disturb forces beyond comprehension. Observation, restraint, and study became as integral to the crusade as strategy and combat. The Imperium's progress was remarkable, yet its coherence remained delicate. Every victory, every integration, and every system brought under the Emperor's authority carried with it responsibilities that could not be ignored. Horus understood that even minor misjudgments could ripple through the fabric of human civilization. Legions could enforce obedience, but they could not instill enduring stability without thoughtful guidance. His careful stewardship ensured that the lunar wolves acted not only as warriors but as custodians, carrying the weight of the Imperium's destiny with disciplined precision. And so, under the calm brilliance of distant stars, the Great Crusade continued its inexorable advance. Worlds were reclaimed, populations integrated, and the Emperor's vision unfolded with measured purpose. Horus guided his legion with both authority and understanding, aware that the successes of the crusade rested not merely on force but on wisdom, vigilance, and the careful maintenance of loyalty. Across the galaxy, humanity's reach extended farther than it ever had. Yet beyond the immediate horizon, the silent depths of space preserved secrets and forces older than the Imperium itself. The weight of destiny pressed upon all. Yet for now, the stars shone clearly, the legions marched with purpose, and the Emperor's distant gaze ensured that the path forward remained illuminated by vision, discipline, and enduring vigilance. The Great Crusade, moving inexorably through the vast reaches of the galaxy, had by now become a testament to humanity's endurance and the Emperor's vision. Star systems long forgotten or isolated during the Age of Strife were brought into the Imperium, and their populations, once scattered and divided, began to feel cohesion of a united humanity. Yet as the fleet sailed between worlds and legions carried the Emperor's authority, Horus began to perceive a subtle, almost imperceptible tension underlying the apparent unity. Loyalty, though widespread, was not absolute. Even the most disciplined societies harbored latent uncertainties, shaped by centuries of isolation, hardship, or governance unknown to terror. Horus understood that the Crusade's success rested not solely on victories in battle. True cohesion required the alignment of thought, purpose, and allegiance across countless worlds and diverse populations. He often observed how trust was built slowly, through consistent example, careful judgment, and the demonstration of authority tempered by restraint. The legions themselves were instruments of this process. Their presence alone could enforce compliance, yet their influence extended beyond martial power. They embodied the Emperor's will, their actions a demonstration of order, discipline, and the promise of security under unified governance. During a campaign on the frontier of explored space, Horus encountered a human colony with a complex history. Its inhabitants had survived isolation by cultivating rigid social hierarchies and long-standing customs that resisted outside influence. When the lunar wolves arrived, initial contact was cautious. Leaders greeted the Imperium with tentative deference, Yet beneath the surface, there were factions prepared to resist any encroachment upon their autonomy. Horus approached the situation with measured patience. Force was unnecessary where understanding and guidance could achieve compliance. By speaking directly with leaders, listening to their concerns, and demonstrating the benefits of imperial unity, he gradually integrated the colony into the Crusade's framework without coercion. The subtle success reinforces understanding. Loyalty, once owned, was more enduring than obedience imposed through fear. The Emperor, observing from terror, entrusted his primarchs with immense authority precisely because human expansion required judgment at every level. The galaxy was too vast, the distances too great, for him to intervene in every matter personally. The primarchs were extensions of his will, yet they also acted as custodians, enforcing both discipline and cohesion among populations that varied in culture, history, and capability. Horus, in particular, had come to recognize the delicate balance between authority and persuasion. His leadership ensured that the legions maintained order, yet his awareness of human complexity allowed him to act with foresight and flexibility, anticipating resistance and addressing before it could grow into conflict. As the Crusade advanced, anomalies continued to surface across the galaxy. Some worlds held ruins of civilizations older than humanity, their purposes and creators unknown. Dormant technologies occasionally activated in the presence of Imperial forces, emitting energies that instruments struggled to classify. These discoveries, while rare, reminded Horus that the universe was far older and more intricate than any immediate conquest could reveal. They required cautious observation, the restraint to avoid reckless engagement, and the foresight to prepare for consequences that might lie far in the future. The Imperium's success depended as much on understanding the galaxy as on subduing it. Horus often reflected upon the nature of loyalty within this context. Legions were bound to their primarchs through oaths, training, and shared purpose, yet the loyalty of entire populations required a different approach. Diplomacy, understanding, and careful demonstration of the benefits of unity were as critical as the presence of space marines. The Emperor's distant gaze ensured the framework of authority, yet the primarchs carried the responsibility of its execution, maintaining order, guiding societies, and preserving the cohesion of human civilization. The lunar wolves, disciplined and formidable as they were, operated under these principles. Each engagement, each planetary integration, and each interaction with local populations was carefully measured. Force was a tool, not a solution. Persuasion, guidance, and example were equally essential. Horus recognized that overreach could fracture loyalty, while patience and understanding could solidify it. The subtle balance between imposition and collaboration became a cornerstone of his leadership philosophy, and it reinforced the enduring stability of the Imperium's frontier. Even within the ranks of the legions, this principle extended further. Space Marines were created for war, yet they were also instruments of the Emperor's will in the broader governance of humanity. Training instilled discipline, but loyalty was nurtured through example, respect, and careful attention to the needs and morale of the soldiers themselves. Horus understood that the strength of his legion depended not merely on individual skill but on the cohesion of the unit, the alignment of purpose, and the shared understanding that their victories served a higher objective. Beyond the immediate concerns of conquest, the galaxy itself remained a vast and patient observer. Ancient forces, dormant technologies, and structures older than human memory persisted in the shadows of space, waiting, perhaps, to test the Imperium in unforeseen ways. Horus's awareness of these realities tempered his actions. Expansion was not merely a matter of imposing authority. It required consideration, judgment, and restraint, ensuring that humanity's progress would endure across centuries and perhaps millennia. In the quiet moments between campaigns, as fleets drifted through warp currents or orbited newly reclaimed worlds, Horus contemplated the Emperor's vision. Each world integrated, each legion disciplined, each fleet deployed contributed to a tapestry of unity that stretched across the stars. Yet the threads were delicate, dependent upon judgment, loyalty, and the careful balancing of power. The Imperium's stability rested not only on victories but on vigilance, foresight, and the maintenance of trust at every level of command. And so, the Great Crusade continued. Humanity expanded its reach across the galaxy, victories were celebrated, and legions enforced both order and guidance. Horus carried a weight of responsibility with calm authority, aware that the success of the Imperium depended not merely on the might of fleets and legions, but on the subtleties of loyalty, governance, and understanding. The Emperor's vision remained a distant but guiding presence, illuminating the path forward. Yet beneath the surface of this apparent stability, the galaxy waited in silence, patient and enduring, holding secrets and forces older than mankind itself, waiting for a moment when even the most disciplined of the Emperor's sons would be tested in ways not yet imagined. By the time the Great Crusade had stretched across hundreds of star systems, the Imperium had achieved a scale that few could truly grasp. Worlds that had once been isolated for millennia were now interconnected by fleets, communications, and the authority of the Emperor. Yet even as humanity's dominion expanded, subtle reminders of the galaxy's enduring complexity persisted. Ancient ruins, dormant machines, and unclassified energies appeared at irregular intervals, offering quiet testimony to civilizations older than mankind. These echoes of forgotten worlds demanded careful attention, for they held both knowledge and caution within their silent presence. The Imperium's expansion was not solely an assertion of power. It was a navigation through a galaxy that retained its own memory, patient and enduring. Horus, Primarch of the Lunar Wolves, continued to carry the weight of this awareness with calm diligence. His legion's campaigns were measured and precise, yet he understood that every victory carried responsibilities far beyond the immediate outcomes of battle. Integration of populations, governance of newly reclaimed worlds, and preservation of stability required judgment that extended beyond martial skill. Every planet offered lessons in both human nature and the subtle currents that shaped civilizations over time. Horus had learned to read these signals with care: the hesitation in the colony's leadership, the uneven loyalties among factions, and the silent influence of ancient ruins that had persisted across centuries. During one campaign on a remote and sparsely populated world, the Lunar Wolves encountered a civilization whose origins predated even the oldest Terran records. The surface was marked by structures carved from black stone, their architecture defying human convention. Symbols adorned walls, pulsing faintly with an energy that instruments struggled to classify. The population, though human in appearance, had long preserved practices and beliefs shaped by isolation and by interaction with remnants of the older civilization. Initial contact was cautious. The Lunar Wolves approached not as conquerors but as observers, seeking to understand before acting. Horus insisted on careful study, ensuring that integration would preserve loyalty rather than sour resentment. This approach exemplified the Primarch's philosophy. Strength could secure immediate objectives, yet enduring stability required wisdom. Force without understanding could fracture populations or destabilize regions far beyond the initial engagement. Horus's campaigns increasingly emphasized measured integration, the careful use of authority, guided by observation, analysis, and restraint. His leadership ensured that the Lunar Wolves acted decisively in battle but with prudence and administration, recognizing that the survival of the Imperium depended equally on cohesion and compliance. The Emperor, distant upon Terra, observed the crusade through channels of insight and guidance. He trusted the Primarchs to interpret his vision, to act with both authority and discretion. The vastness of the galaxy made direct oversight impossible, leaving judgment in the hands of those trained not only in war but in governance, diplomacy, and understanding of human nature. Horus, in particular, demonstrated a balance between initiative and fidelity to the Emperor's intent. His decisions reflected both the demands of conquest and the subtle requirements of stewardship, ensuring that the Imperium's expansion remained coherent and stable. Across the frontier, the galaxy itself remained a patient and subtle force. Ancient energies and forgotten technologies responded in minor yet unmistakable ways to the presence of Imperial forces. Occasionally, instruments detected fluctuations in fields that were neither fully physical nor entirely psychic. Surveyors reported unusual patterns in the warp, brief disturbances that vanished as quickly as they appeared. Horus recognized these occurrences not as threats but as reminders. The universe had endured cycles of civilization far older than humanity. These echoes demanded caution, observation, and respect, for their significance was beyond immediate comprehension. Horus's attention to these subtleties extended to the management of his legion. The Lunar Wolves, though unmatched in combat, were instruments of guidance as much as instruments of war. Leadership required that they understand not only the tactics of battle but the nuances of governance, the psychology of loyalty, and the patience to allow civilizations to adjust to the Imperium's authority. Training instilled discipline, but it was a Primaca's example that instilled enduring trust. Soldiers learned to balance obedience with judgment, action with restraint, and strength with understanding, reflecting the philosophy Horus carried into every campaign. The careful integration of worlds often revealed the latent complexities of human civilization. Even populations eager to join the Imperium retained customs, beliefs, and rivalries that required careful management. Horus moved to address these with both firmness and diplomacy. On occasion, minor conflict arose among local leaders or between factions, yet the presence of the Lunar Wolves and the measured guidance of their Primarch ensured resolution without unnecessary violence. Victory was not merely the conquest of territory, it was a consolidation of human society into a coherent whole, capable of enduring under the Emperor's vision. In quieter moments, Horus reflected upon the galaxy's enduring memory. Stars, ruins, and energies carried echoes of civilizations long past, some older than humanity itself. Each campaign, each recovered world, and each interaction with distant populations reminded him of the scale and fragility of the Imperium. Strength alone could not guarantee stability. Knowledge, patience, and careful judgment were equally essential. The Great Crusade was a triumph of human will, yet it unfolded within a universe that had long endured cycles of rise and fall, observation, and patience. As the fleets moved from star to star, the Lunar Wolves continued to execute their campaigns with precision, balancing action with observation. Worlds were integrated, populations guided, and the Emperor's vision extended across the galaxy. Yet Horus remained ever mindful of the silent forces beyond comprehension, patient observers that might one day challenge the Imperium in ways unforeseen. For now, the Crusade advanced, humanity's unity grew stronger, and the stars seemed to shine clearly. Yet the echoes of forgotten worlds reminded all who traveled the void that the galaxy's memory endured, patient, eternal, and ever watchful, quietly shaping the path of destiny. As the Great Crusade extended its reach across the galaxy, the scale of the Imperium's dominion had become vast beyond immediate comprehension. Fleets traversed light years with precise coordination, legions enforced the Emperor's will, and newly reclaimed worlds were gradually stitched into a coherent structure of governance, trade, and communication. Yet this unprecedented expansion revealed a tension inherent in the act of ruling across such immensity, the impossibility of personal oversight. Even the Emperor, with his unmatched intellect and foresight, could not directly supervise every campaign, every fleet movement, or every planetary integration. The responsibility of maintaining unity, order, and cohesion fell largely to the Primarchs, entrusted as extensions of his vision, yet expected to exercise judgment independently, often in circumstances beyond terrestrial comprehension. Horus, at the forefront of the Lunar Wolves, carried this burden with deliberate thought. His campaign combined the efficiency of military precision with the subtle art of governance, recognizing that the Imperium's strength was as much in its organization as in its fleets and legions. Across the frontier, populations varied widely. Some had been isolated for centuries, others for millennia. Their customs, hierarchies, and belief systems often conflicted with imperial expectations. Yet Horus approached these challenges with patience and care. His authority was enforced where necessary, but persuasion and guidance were equally critical tools. Loyalty, he understood, could not be imposed alone. It had to be cultivated, nurtured, and maintained through consistent example and clear demonstration of the Emperor's vision. The galaxy, in its patient immensity, reminded all who traveled its void of the fragility inherent in expansion. Ancient ruins, often buried beneath centuries of sediment or hidden in the depths of forgotten worlds, occasionally revealed themselves to the Crusade. Some contained mechanisms that operated in ways inexplicable by contemporary understanding, emitting subtle energies that instruments could not fully measure. Others bore inscriptions and symbols whose meaning was lost to human memory, resonating faintly in ways that could influence the psyche or warp perception. Horus approached these findings with restraint, instructing survey teams to observe and document rather than interfere. The wisdom of patient study, he understood, was as important as immediate control, for the galaxy carried the accumulated experiences of civilizations far older than humanity. Among the Lunar Wolves, Horus instilled this philosophy. The Legion, disciplined and formidable, was trained to execute orders with unwavering precision, yet it was equally prepared to exercise judgment under the guidance of its Primarch. Officers learned to balance immediate tactical concerns with the broader consequences of their actions. Soldiers internalized the principle that Horus emphasized constantly. Victory achieved without understanding and foresight could be temporary, while stability founded upon loyalty and wisdom endured. This alignment of martial skill with prudent judgment distinguished the Lunar Wolves from other legions and ensured that their campaigns reinforced not only imperial authority, but also cohesion and long-term stability. On numerous worlds, Horus encountered populations whose survival had depended upon isolation and adaptation to harsh environments. Initial interactions often required negotiation and observation rather than force. By engaging with local leaders, listening to concerns, and respecting the nuances of culture and tradition, he gradually guided societies toward unity with the Imperium. In many instances, this approach prevented conflict that might have destabilized entire systems. Force remained a tool of last resort. Patience, communication, and subtle guidance proved equally effective in solidifying loyalty. The Lunar Wolves became not only conquerors but mediators, custodians, and stabilizers of human civilization across countless worlds. The Emperor, observing from Terra, relied upon the judgment of his primarchs to maintain coherence across the Crusade. Horus's approach exemplified the delicate balance required for effective expansion. Strength alone could secure a world. Wisdom ensured that it remained integrated. Every campaign, every decision, and every act of measured authority contributed to the Imperium's enduring structure. Horus understood that misjudgment in even a single system could ripple outward, affecting morale, loyalty, and the perception of Terra's guidance across multiple sectors. The weight of omnipresence, the ability to influence but not control every detail, rested heavily upon him, yet he bore it with composure, awareness, and a steadfast commitment to the Emperor's vision. Beyond human populations, the galaxy retained signs of its ancient complexity. Ruins, dormant constructs, and subtle warp fluctuations hinted at civilizations that had endured long before humanity, their purposes obscure, their mechanisms persistent. These forces were not overtly hostile, but their presence demanded respect. Horus treated these encounters as opportunities for observation and understanding, ensuring that the Imperium's expansion did not inadvertently awaken threats or destabilize regions beyond immediate recognition. Knowledge, he knew, was as critical to long-term survival as martial supremacy. Within the legions, this philosophy was mirrored in daily operations. Officers maintained records, monitored morale, and ensured adherence to the Primarch's guidance. Training emphasized precision and discipline, but also observation and awareness. Every soldier understood that the Imperium's success depended upon both their strength and their ability to execute commands thoughtfully. Horus's leadership created a culture in which action and reflection were inseparable, and where obedience was intertwined with comprehension. As fleets moved between distant stars, Horus allowed himself moments of reflection. The universe appeared vast, silent, and eternal, each star a reminder of civilizations that had arisen and fallen long before humanity. Even the Imperium, for all its might and order, was but a recent addition to a galaxy that retained its own memory, silent yet perceptible. Every conquest, every campaign, and every decision was set against this broader backdrop, and the careful management of the Imperium's unity became as vital as any military victory. And so, the Great Crusade continued under the Emperor's distant gaze. Worlds were integrated, fleets maintained order, and the Lunar Wolves carried a weight of authority with steady resolve. Horus guided both soldiers and populations alike, balancing enforcement with understanding, strength with wisdom. Humanity's dominion expanded, yet the galaxy remained patient, its ancient secrets and subtle forces watching, enduring, and waiting. The Imperium's successes were tangible and monumental, yet Horus was ever aware of the fragile balance upon which they rested, a balance that demanded vigilance, foresight, and unwavering attention to the weight of destiny itself. As the Great Crusade pressed deeper into uncharted regions of the galaxy, the Imperium's reach extended into territories that had long remained untouched by human influence. Even the most disciplined fleets and the most formidable legions encountered environments and phenomena that resisted immediate comprehension. Warp travel, though mastered in principle, revealed its subtle dangers in ways that often eluded measurement. Ships passing through the currents of the Imperium occasionally reported anomalies, slight distortions, echoes of past events, or fleeting sensations of unease that could not be explained by instrumentation. Horus, aware of the fragility of perception and human understanding, instructed his officers to record and observe, but to act only with measured caution. The galaxy, he recognized, retained its memory and its patience, and the Imperium was but a newcomer navigating forces that had endured across eons. The Lunar Wolves, under Horus's vigilant command, maintained discipline and cohesion as they traversed these uncertain regions. Each fleet movement, planetary survey, and military operation was conducted with precision, yet tempered by the Primarch's awareness that knowledge was as vital as conquest. Worlds that appeared peaceful on approach sometimes concealed remnants of civilizations older than humanity, or traces of energies that could affect both perception and behavior. Horus treated these discoveries as opportunities for study, guiding his legion to observe without interference unless absolutely necessary. He understood that reckless interference could awaken forces far beyond immediate comprehension, and that the stability of the Imperium rested upon the careful balancing of action and restraint. Horus often reflected upon the nature of the warp itself. It was a medium of immense utility and danger, capable of connecting distant systems with speed impossible in real space, yet it was also unpredictable and volatile. Subtle currents could shift without warning, carrying both fleets and their occupants into unexpected regions, and the Imperium preserved impressions of thought and emotion that sometimes manifested in unexpected ways. The Emperor had mastered its principles, yet even he allowed his Primarch's discretion in applying their understanding to specific campaigns. Horus's judgment, sharpened through countless engagements and observations, ensured that the Lunar Wolves navigated these hazards with both skill and prudence. During one campaign on a remote sector near the galactic rim, Horus encountered a planet whose surface bore the remnants of a vanished civilization. Its architecture was unlike any catalogued by Imperial historians, and symbols carved into stone pulsed faintly with energy that instruments could only partially measure. Survey teams reported unusual readings in the warp above the planet, subtle distortions that did not correlate with known celestial phenomena. Horus approached the situation with calm vigilance, directing careful observation and documentation rather than immediate exploration. Force was unnecessary. Understanding, restraint, and patient study were paramount. The galaxy, he recognized, had endured far longer than the Imperium and would continue to endure beyond any single campaign. The Emperor, watching from Terra, remained a guiding presence across the stars. His distant gaze ensured cohesion, authority, and purpose, yet the scale of the crusade required that Primarchs act with independent judgment. Horus carried this responsibility with both confidence and care, understanding that every decision could ripple outward, affecting multiple systems, populations, and fleets. The Imperium's coherence depended upon the careful alignment of authority, loyalty, and oversight. His example reinforced the understanding that the success of the Great Crusade relied as much on observation, restraint, and guidance as it did on the martial skill of the legions themselves. On newly integrated worlds, populations often required careful management to maintain stability. Even those who welcomed the Imperium initially sometimes harbored subtle rivalries, cultural tensions, or misunderstandings that could escalate if left unaddressed. Horus emphasized diplomacy and careful communication alongside decisive action, ensuring that integration did not merely impose obedience but fostered enduring loyalty. The Lunar Wolves became not only enforcers but stewards of human civilization, guiding populations toward unity under the Emperor's vision while respecting the subtle complexities of local societies. The galaxy, however, retained forces beyond human observation. Ancient ruins, dormant machines, and subtle warp energies hinted at intelligence and civilizations long extinct. These remnants were not overtly hostile, yet their presence required caution. Horus recognized the necessity of patience, understanding that the Imperium's expansion could not rely solely upon conquest but must incorporate careful observation and study of the universe's deeper currents. Knowledge and foresight were as essential as military might, ensuring that progress was sustainable and resilient. Within the legions, Horus's philosophy was instilled rigorously. Soldiers trained not only in combat but also in awareness, observation, and disciplined judgment. Officers were expected to weigh the consequences of actions beyond the immediate battlefield, balancing the necessity of force with the subtleties of governance. This approach reinforced the cohesion and stability of both the Lunar Wolves and the populations they guided, ensuring that the Imperium's authority was maintained through both strength and wisdom. In moments of quiet reflection aboard his flagship, Horus contemplated the galaxy's patient vastness. The stars seemed endless, each a marker of civilizations that had risen and fallen long before humanity, each a reminder of the impermanence of even the greatest powers. The Imperium's reach, while vast and growing, remained subject to the subtle currents of history and the enduring presence of forces beyond immediate comprehension. Vigilance, judgment, and patience were essential, for the success of the crusade depended upon the careful balance of authority, knowledge, and foresight. And so, as fleets moved through the warp and planets joined the Imperium's fold, the Lunar Wolves continued their campaigns with measured precision. Worlds were integrated, populations guided, and the Emperor's vision extended across the stars. Yet beyond the borders of human comprehension, the galaxy remained patient and watchful, its ancient secrets enduring, its energies subtle yet persistent. The Great Crusade advanced steadily, and Horus bore the weight of responsibility with calm authority, aware that even in the apparent certainty of victory, the universe held mysteries capable of shaping the Imperium's destiny in ways yet unseen. As the Great Crusade progressed into its later decades, the Imperium's presence across the galaxy had become both vast and intricately structured. Star systems that had once been isolated, forgotten, or abandoned were now woven into the fabric of human civilization, their populations aligned with the Emperor's vision, and their resources integrated to sustain fleets, legions, and infrastructure. The sheer scale of this expansion demanded a careful balance of authority and foresight, as the governance of thousands of worlds could not rely upon force alone. Horus, Primarch of the Lunar Wolves, understood that each success was accompanied by responsibility, and that even the smallest misjudgment could ripple outward with unforeseen consequences. The galaxy remained an enduring, patient presence, observing humanity's rise with subtle, often imperceptible influence. Ancient ruins, long-dormant machines, and energies older than human memory emerged sporadically across newly discovered worlds. Some were innate, silent witnesses to the passage of civilizations, while others exhibited faint, almost imperceptible activity, mechanisms responding to observation, energies fluctuating in ways instruments struggled to measure. Horus approached the phenomena with caution, instructing his officers to study and document rather than interfere, recognizing that the universe itself contained a memory and was far older than the Imperium. Patience and understanding, he knew, were as critical to the Crusade's long-term success as martial skill or fleet coordination. The Lunar Wolves operated under this philosophy with disciplined precision. Each campaign, whether conducted in the heart of a populous system or along the remote edges of explored space, was executed with foresight and careful observation. Horus trained his officers to consider consequences beyond the immediate, to balance the necessity of action with the imperatives of stability, and to recognize the subtle currents that might influence human behavior across generations. Soldiers were taught that strength alone could secure victory, but wisdom, patience, and vigilance ensured its endurance. The Primarch's example instilled a culture in which obedience, loyalty, and understanding were inseparable. Horus also recognized that loyalty among the Imperium citizens was not guaranteed merely through conquest. Populations varied widely in temperament, belief, and history, and many had endured isolation for centuries or millennia. Integration required more than the imposition of imperial authority. It demanded diplomacy, guidance, and the reinforcement of trust. On numerous worlds, he personally met with leaders, listened to concerns, and demonstrated the advantages of unity under the Emperor's guidance. Force was always available, but applied only when absolutely necessary. By carefully balancing authority with respect, Horus ensured that allegiance was cultivated deliberately, resulting in enduring cohesion rather than brittle compliance. The Emperor, ever distant yet always present, provided overarching guidance and a framework of vision that extended across the galaxy. Yet the scale of the crusade ensured that Primarchs acted with discretion, judgment, and foresight. Horus carried this responsibility with calm authority, aware that each decision affected not only his legion and immediate objectives, but the broader stability of the Imperium. The weight of omnipresence, the understanding that the success of thousands of systems depended upon measured judgment, rested heavily upon him. Still, he bore it with composure, directing the actions of the Lunar Wolves with a clarity that reflected both experience and devotion. Across the frontier, the galaxy continued to reveal subtle reminders of its vast and enduring complexity. Warp currents remained unpredictable despite the Imperium's mastery of navigation. Occasional distortions, fleeting apparitions, or inexplicable energy readings appeared along the path of fleets. Ancient constructions, buried beneath centuries of sediment or hidden on remote planets, sometimes responded faintly to observation, their purpose inscrutable. Horus regarded these occurrences not as immediate threats, but as evidence of the universe's memory, and he instructed careful documentation and patient analysis. Understanding the phenomena was as crucial as ensuring victory in any engagement, for the Imperium's future depended on both knowledge and preparedness. Within the Lunar Wolves, this philosophy extended to internal structure and discipline. Officers monitored morale, maintained records, and ensured that the Legion acted in accordance with the Primaca's guidance. Soldiers internalized a dual principle: precision in execution and awareness of consequence. Every decision, every deployment, and every action was framed within the understanding that the Imperium's stability depended not merely upon victory, but upon thoughtful leadership. Strength alone could dominate a battlefield. Wisdom ensured that victories endured, and that human civilization remained coherent across the vast expanse of space. Horus's reflections often returned to the nature of the galaxy itself. Stars, planets, and remnants of civilizations long vanished bore testimony to the enduring scale and patience of the universe. Even the Imperium, for all its order and power, was but a brief note in the ongoing narrative of existence. Each campaign, each integration of a new world, was a delicate exercise in stewardship, balancing authority with guidance, force with foresight, and conquest with careful observation. The Primarch understood that these elements were inseparable, that the success of the Great Crusade depended upon the steady alignment of all three. As fleets moved from system to system and the Lunar Wolves carried the Emperor's authority outward, Horus maintained a quiet vigilance. The galaxy, patient and eternal, preserved secrets and forces older than humanity itself. While humanity expanded, prospered, and unified under Terra's banners, these forces lingered, unseen but present, reminding all who traverse the void that understanding and caution were as essential as strength. The Great Crusade advanced steadily, victories accumulated, and the Imperium grew in scope and cohesion, yet Horus remained mindful of the fragile balance that supported it. And so, beneath the distant light of uncounted stars, the Lunar Wolves continued their campaigns with calm authority and measured precision. Worlds were integrated, populations guided, and fleets maintained order across sectors of the Imperium. The Emperor's vision extended steadily, yet the galaxy remained patient, watchful, and enduring. Horus bore the weight of responsibility with quiet dignity, aware that every victory, every integration, and every moment of vigilance contributed to the preservation of humanity's future. In the calm of space, under the silent gaze of the stars, the Imperium thrived. Yet the universe held its secrets patiently, waiting for the day when even the most careful vigilance would be tested in ways yet unforeseen.